Hello, friends. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. My name is Justin, and I'm one of the pastors at One Life Church. One Life is a church family committed to bringing the kingdom of Jesus to earth, one life at a time, through intentional relationships. Now, before we jump into the sermon, I want to ask you to do two things. First, hit that subscribe button so that you can follow along with what God is doing in and through One Life Church. Second, in the description below, you will find a link for onelifechurch.tv. This is where you can learn more about our church. If you live in the Concord, North Carolina area, I want to invite you to join us in person on a Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. You can plan that visit at onelifechurch.tv. I pray that today's sermon encourages you to continue following the person of Jesus in your everyday life. Let's dive in. All right, friends, today I'm going to tackle a question. And that question is this: what is the greatest gift that you can give to your kids? What's the greatest gift that you can give to your kids? Now, for those in the room that are not parents, don't check out on me. Do not check out on me. What is the greatest gift that you can give to the next generation? To the generation that is coming up behind you. Because as parents, this is our responsibility. And if you're not a parent, this is your responsibility. This is all of our responsibility. It's our biblical responsibility. Paul talks about it in the book of Titus. It's this little bitty book in the New Testament. And Paul talks about this picture of the church where the older women invest in and disciple the younger women, and the older men set an example for the younger men. And Paul is painting this vision for the church. This is our biblical responsibility to invest in, to disciple the next generation, to point the next generation to Jesus. So this morning, if you're a parent, you have that responsibility. If you are not a parent, you have that biblical calling and responsibility to point the next generation to Jesus. So this is what we're going to talk about. What is the greatest gift that we can give our kids? What does the next generation need from us? I want to start by reading a Eugene Peterson quote. If you're tired of Eugene Peterson, I'm sorry. He's just too smart to not. So he wrote a book called The Contemplative Pastor. And this quote's kind of long, and it might sting just a touch, but it is so good. And I want to start here and then work from this place. Here's what he says. Each generation is, in poet John Berryman's words, unwell in a new way. The way in which the present generation is unwell, that is, the forms under which it experiences sin, is through episodes of adolescence. There was a time when ideas and living styles were initiated in the adult world, filtered down to the youth. Now the movement goes the other way. Lifestyles are generated at the youth level and pushed upward. Dress fashions, hairstyles, music, and morals that are adopted by youth are evangelically pushed on an adult world, which in turn seems eager to be converted. Youth culture began as a kind of fad and then grew into a movement. Today, it is nearly fascist in its influence, forcing its perceptions and styles on everyone, whether he likes it or not. This observation helps plot a pastoral understanding of people. There is a spread of the adolescent experience upward through the generations. Instead of being over and done with when the 21st birthday is reached, it infects the upper generations as well. It is common to see adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and 60s who have not only adopted the external trappings of the youth culture, but are actually experiencing the emotions, traumas, and difficulties typical of youth. They're experiencing life under its adolescent forms. the sins of the sons and daughters, it seems, are being visited upon the fathers and the mothers. Now, he wrote that in 1989. 1989. Does anybody remember the hairstyles of 1989? Yes, they were pushed on us by the youth of the 1980s. We did not choose those, right? The music we chose, that was good music back then, all right? But 1989, and I've learned this about Eugene Peterson. He was a pastor, but more than anything, he was a prophet. He was a prophet. He had a way of writing things that his time, they didn't quite see yet, but that now that we read it 30, 40 years later, we're like, yeah, we saw that happen and we continue to see it happening in our world. Now, what does it look like in 2024? What does it look like? What are the ways in which the younger generation is unwell? What does this look like in 2024? He kind of describes it in what it looked like in 1989, but what does it look like in 2024? Well, I want to give you two ways that I think that the younger generation are unwell today. And I could make a whole list of things that I see in our culture, the ways in which the younger generation are currently unwell, but I just want to give you, these two are intricately connected to one another. I don't think that they can be taken apart. And that is distraction and isolation. These are two ways that the younger generation are currently unwell. A guy named Jonathan Haidt just wrote a book called The Anxious Generation. If you have not read this book, if you don't know about this book, if you've never heard about this book, you need to read it. If you are a teacher, you need to read it. If you are a parent, you need to read it. If you are breathing in 2024, you need to read this book. And so I put the Amazon link in the Sermon Hub for you to go and grab a copy of this book. It's a long book. If you don't want to read the whole thing, that's fine. Read the introduction and the first two chapters. That'll be enough to scare the bejeebies out of you. Okay? But here are some numbers that Jonathan Haidt shares about the younger generation. This is a new number just from the last few months. The average teenager today spends around 9 hours looking at screens. Screens, phones, TVs, iPads, 9 hours. That equals about 50% of the time that they are awake, they are on a screen. American teenagers' screen time has increased by around 4 hours since 2015. Out of the 9 hours that they spend on screens, 5 of those hours are spent on social media. The percentage of teens who say that they are online almost constantly during the day has almost doubled since 2014. Teenagers spend around 3 hours per day watching TV or videos on YouTube. Now, here's the problem with all of those numbers. These activities that I just named, being on screens, YouTube, social media, all these things, these are considered to be disembodied activities. Disembodied, which means that they are not person to person. They are disembodied activities. Therefore, they are activities that will lead us towards isolation rather than what we all need, which is embodied relationships. These things that we carry around in our pockets, that we spend hours and hours on, that our younger generation are glued to constantly, they do not lead us to embodied relationships, which is what we all need. They lead us towards disembodied relationships. Now, the very thing that this generation uses for distraction is actually pulling them into isolation. And we know this, that isolation is never good. Isolation is never good. Isolation leads to higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, and higher rates of suicidal ideation. Distraction isolation are currently killing this generation. Now, I don't think that there's anyone in this room that would disagree that this is true of this current generation, that this is the reality that the younger generation is facing. I think all of us in this room know it and see it. We see it all the time. But let's revisit for just a moment the last part of Eugene Peterson's quote that we read earlier. He said, "There is a spread of the adolescent experience upward through the generations. Instead of being over and done with when the 21st birthday is reached, it actually infects the upper generations as well. It is common to see adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who have not only adopted the external trappings of the youth culture, but are actually experiencing the emotions, traumas, and difficulties typical of youth. They are experiencing life under its adolescent forms. The sins of the sons, it seems, are being visited upon the fathers." What Eugene Peterson is saying is that the younger generation is having more of an influence on how the older generation lives rather than the other way around. Now, I have a theory, and I know that when a sociologist talks about generations, they have ages in mind that fit with each generational title. For example, Gen Y are those who were born between 1981 and 1996. Gen Z are those born between 1997 and 2012. But here's my theory. Don't worry, we're going to get to the Bible in just a second, okay? I got to lay some groundwork. Here's my theory. I don't think that the generation titles only fit those who were born between certain years. I think that the generational titles actually describe all of us who are being influenced by the surrounding culture currently in a certain time period. Now, I don't have time for us to have an open debate about this, but if you'd like to talk more about it, we can. But let me give you an example, okay? Gen Z is what is called the smartphone generation. Their childhood was literally defined by and shaped by constant connection through smartphones. We would all agree that a current 15-year-old, and I have one, has been shaped by the smartphone and by social media. Now, I don't think it's just 15-year-olds. So let me do an exercise. If you were born before 1997, will you please stand up? How far? Good. All right, good. Now listen carefully, okay? Listen carefully. This is going to be an exercise. I want you to sit down if you grew up with a smartphone in your hand. Okay? Grew up as a kid. That should be none of you, okay? All right. Now, I want you to sit down if you currently do not have a smartphone. You don't have an iPhone, you don't have an Android, sit down if you don't have one. All right, good. Now, I want you to sit down if you have moments throughout your day and your week when you feel like your smartphone distracts you. Okay, you're great. Give these people a round of applause. Good job. Okay, you can sit down. But did you see the percentage? Did you see it? I think most of us in this room would agree that smartphones have a way of distracting us. So it's not just a problem for the 15-year-old. It's all of us. It's not just, dare I say, the sins of the younger generation, but it's all of us. What's happening is that we as the older generation, as the parents and the grandparents, are following the lead of the younger generation rather than us leading the younger generation by example. This is what Eugene Peterson is getting at. The younger generation needs the older generations to lead them. Our kids and our grandkids need us to lead them to a better way of living. They need us to set an example for them to follow. And we're not doing a great job of it. Here's what I want us to hear today. Our kids, the younger generation, need, and I believe they want, because they're really smart. They are really smart, and they know that the current way that they are living and experiencing the world around them is not fantastic. They know it. They've done research on this. They've done interviews with kids, and they know this is not the best way to live. So they want someone to follow into a better life. I believe that. They're waiting for someone to step in front of them and say, let me show you a better way. I believe this is what Paul was getting at in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. When Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Or as another translation says, you should imitate me just as I imitate Christ. Now let me give you some context for the church that Paul is writing to. It's a church in a city called Corinth, and Paul, on his second missionary journey, started this church. He planted this church. And there were several people in this church that were very young. They were the younger generation, very young in their faith. And they were being pressured by the culture around them. They were being tempted to shape their lives around the culture of their time. And Paul saw this. He saw that how the younger generation was being shaped by the world around them. And so Paul, in the middle of chapter 10 and chapter 11, there's this one line. I encourage you to go to the Bible app or open your Bible at home and look at it. It is so strange. It's almost as if Paul did it on purpose so that we wouldn't miss it. And he just writes this one line to these young believers, to this next generation of the church. And he says, follow me as I follow Christ. Follow my example. He didn't look at the younger generation and say, show me the way. And I'll be like you. I'll follow your example. He said, follow me as I follow Christ. Now let's break this down. The first two words, follow me. What Paul is talking about here is what we know as embodied relationships, person-to-person relationships, okay? And that's what Paul is encouraging, is he's inviting these people into embodied relationships. And the first thing that we can do for the generation that is coming up behind us is to invite them into relationship. To invite them to sit at our table, to invite them into our lives, to invite them to see how we live, to show up in their life. That's what they need from us. They need relationship. They don't need us to be disconnected from them. They don't need us to sit on the sideline and just let them figure it out. They don't. They need us to invite them into relationship. And Jesus sets this example all throughout the Gospels. He sets this example for us. I think of the story when Jesus and his disciples show up to town and they go to Mary and Martha's house for dinner. And Jesus is sitting in the living room and Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus, embodied relationships, learning from him, following him. This is what the next generation needs. It's for us to invite them into relationship. Gosh, my pack is just freaking out. I'm sorry. Another example, when Jesus invites John the Baptist's disciples to come and follow him in John chapter 1, and he says to them, come and see where I stay. Come to my house. And then it says that they spent the rest of the afternoon with him. This is what the next generation needs. It's for us to invite them to see our lives. I think of the story where Jesus calls the tax collector Zacchaeus out of the tree. And then he says to him, I'm coming to your house today. This was reverse hospitality. I'm going to come hang out with you because that's what you need and that's what you want. And so he did. He went and he spent time with Zacchaeus, and he went and spent time with his friends. Embodied relationships. This is what it means when we say, follow me. Not from a distance, but up close. Now, let me give you some ways that you can do this in two environments. Number one, in your own home. In your own home. And right now I'm going to talk to parents. The way that you can do this with your kids is, number one, put your phones away during meals. Put them away. If you need to take them in the other bedroom, do it. If you need to take it and put it in the car, do it. If you need to take it to your neighbor's house and say, I can't be responsible with this and I want to spend time with my kids, will you babysit this thing for me? I don't care what it takes. I promise you, when you get to the end of your life or your kids turn 18 and go to college, you're not going to look back and be like, man, I'm so glad I spent so much time on my phone and not looking my kids in the eyes. I promise you we won't. Right? And so put it away and be present with them. Be in that embodied relationship. The next thing that you can do at your home is say yes to your kids when they ask stuff. Say yes. You're like, yeah, but I'm so tired. We're all tired. I'm so busy. We're all busy. You only get this much time. Say yes. What it looks like in my house is when my kids ask, can we go out and play catch? Yes. 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 That's my answer. Yeah, I just started doing that like a year ago. Yes. Say yes when they ask you to do stuff. You don't like it? It don't matter. Do it. Spend time with them. Be with them. Invite them to be present with you. Now, the other environment that you can do this in is here at One Life, okay? So all of you that are not parents, check back in, okay? This is all of us. This is our biblical responsibility as the church, is to invest in the 4 million kids that run the hallways here. And we keep having more, right? It is our responsibility, it's your responsibility to invest in them and to lead them to Jesus, to make much of Jesus. You don't get out of it, none of you. We're all in this, got it? To point them to Jesus. So I'm going to give you a challenge. Over the next 45 days, I want you to pick a kid that goes to church here, and I want you to pray for them by name. Every day for the next 45 days. Whichever one runs into you when they come flying back in the front door, that's your kid. If you don't know their name, just stop them and be like, what's your name? I'm going to be praying for you. Okay? All right? It might be weird, but a few weeks ago we talked about leaning in the awkward. Just do it. Just pick a kid. Not your own kid, just pick a kid. And start praying for them by name. You don't know what to pray, that's fine. Just, God, I want you, this is my prayer that I pray over my kids every day. God, I need you to reveal yourself to Marcus. God, I need you to reveal yourself to Madeline. Easy enough? And over the next 45 days, I want you to find a way to encourage them. Whether it's a card in the mail, it's you invite their family over for dinner. I just want you to find a way to encourage them. Because a lot of them, this world that we just described of screens is very discouraging. And they need some people that come alongside of them and say, follow me. And they need some people that say, it's going to be okay. There's a better way. Are you with me? So you can do that in your home, and you can do that here at One Life. Follow me as I follow Christ. So what's the greatest gift that you can give to your kids in the next generation? This past week, I saw an Instagram post, and we know that everything that is on Instagram is true. And so, so I saw this Instagram post, and this lady was talking about this. And she said that the greatest thing that she can give her kids is to, this is her words, to love myself, to accept myself, and to embrace myself. And I sat and I looked at it for a second and I was like, on the surface, that sounds true. It sounds right. I actually read it to my daughter last night. And my daughter, who's 13, said, no. And I was like, tell me more. They're really smart. It's not. As a follower of Jesus, I get what this post is trying to say, but as a follower of Jesus, I disagree. I disagree. Because I believe that the greatest thing that I can give my kids and give the next generation is not me loving more of me. It's me loving more of Jesus. And the more that I love Jesus, the more that my life will be transformed and I will look more and more and more like Jesus. And the more that my life looks like Jesus, the more that my kids and the next generation will be drawn to Jesus. Here's the problem. It looks right on the surface, but if I think that the greatest gift that I can give to my kids is for me to love myself, who are my kids going to be drawn to? Me. And I am not a good savior. I am a bad savior. I get it wrong a lot. I mean, I want to be in relationship with my kids, but I don't want my kids to look at me and think that somehow I am their savior, that I am the end all be all. I want my kids to be drawn to Jesus. And so what they need to see is that I love more of Jesus. I much of Jesus. And I believe that the more they see me loving Jesus and my life transformed into the likeness of Jesus, that they will be drawn to Jesus. This is the greatest gift that I can give my kids. My kids need to see me follow Jesus so that they know what it looks like to follow Jesus. Jesus tells us what it looks like. In John chapter 15, verses 1 through 5, he says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message that I've given you. Remain in me, abide in me, rest in me, stay connected to me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. My friends, if we want the next generation to know Jesus, then we have to follow Jesus. We have to stay connected to Jesus. Jesus says it very clearly. It might sting just a touch, but that is that your kids are not going to follow Jesus and know Jesus. Their lives are not going to reflect Jesus if you are not staying connected to Jesus so that your kids can watch you follow Jesus. Because when you're not remaining connected to Jesus, the fruit of your life, no good. Not good fruit. But when you stay connected to Jesus, remaining in him, abiding in him, then the fruit of your life, your kids, it's going to be really beautiful, really heavenly. It's going to look more and more like Jesus. My kids need to see me remaining connected to Jesus. The next generation needs to see us remaining connected to Jesus, learning from Jesus, trusting Jesus. They need to see a life lived that looks more and more like Jesus. The other thing that I think of is the story that comes in Matthew chapter 17, where Jesus takes Peter and his two brothers, James and John, up on a mountain. And Jesus is transformed in a moment in a cloud, and he starts having this conversation with Moses and Elijah. Peter freaks out and he's like, we should just build a house here and live here because this is really cool. And then a bright cloud covers them, and God speaks over them and says, this is my dearly loved son who brings me great joy. And then God says this of Jesus, listen to him. Listen to him. My kids need to see me listening to Jesus. My kids need to see me listening to Jesus and responding to Jesus in obedience. That's what they need. So I have an action step for you. The voice from heaven, God the Father, told Jesus' disciples to listen to Jesus. And I believe that he would tell you the same thing today. I believe he would look at you and say, listen to Jesus and respond to him in obedience so that the next generation can follow your example. I hate this question that I'm about to say out loud. I almost took it out because it's too convicting, but I'm going to say it anyways. My friends, what if we listened to Jesus more than we listen to videos on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok? One of the things that I am afraid of in the church is that our theology, which is the understanding of who God is and how God operates in the world, that our theology is being shaped by people that we don't even know and know nothing about on social media platforms. It's literally shaping the theology of the church in 2024. And I want my theology to be shaped by the voice and the person and the teachings of Jesus. And I want my kids and I want the next generation to see me and my theology and my walk, my life being shaped by the voice of Jesus rather than the voice of social media. I mean this. What if we started our days off listening to Jesus? This is convicting for me because most of my days I wake up and the first thing is work out my thumb. Am I the only one in the room that does this? I work out every morning, just work one thumb. But what if we started our days off listening to Jesus? What if we ended our days off listening to Jesus? And what if our kids and the next generation saw this? What if we listened to Jesus when we were feeling stressed or feeling anxious or sad or depressed or wanting to throw in the towel and quit? What if we listened to Jesus' voice in those moments? What if we retreated into the presence of Jesus when we felt the temptation to isolate ourselves? What if we set this example for our kids and the next generation? What if we could say to our kids, follow me as I follow Christ? Let me give you an action step to start doing that this week. I call it the gospel challenge. I've been using this for probably 15 years now. How do we learn how to listen to the voice of Jesus? By reading the teachings of Jesus. And we have the teachings of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Everybody say this with me. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the first 4 books of the New Testament. They are the gospel accounts. They are the place where we learn about the life of Jesus, the stories of Jesus, the ministry of Jesus, and the teachings of Jesus. It's the place where we learn what Jesus' voice sounds like. Now, I'm not saying that we can't hear Jesus' voice in other ways, because I believe that he still speaks to us in our everyday life. But how do we know what his voice sounds like? We start in the Gospels, and we learn to hear his voice, right? And so I want to challenge you to read the 4 Gospels in the next 45 days. And you're like, can't do it. It's really easy. 2 chapters a day for the next 45 days to get to know Jesus. 2 chapters. Take you around 8 minutes. If you're one of those people who are like, I don't read. Not cool, but cool for now. Open the Bible app, push the play button. It'll read it to you. You drive a lot, push the play button in the car, it'll read it to you. Start off your day like, I don't know if I can do 2 at a time. Cool. 1 in the morning, one in the evening or on your commute home, whatever it takes, 2 chapters a day. And I want you to ask these 2 questions. What do these stories tell me about who Jesus is and how Jesus interacts with the world around him? So what do I learn about Jesus? And how can I live like Jesus did in these 2 chapters today? What do I learn about Jesus and how can I live it out? And I want to challenge you over the next 45 days to get to know Jesus so that you can say with confidence to the next generation, to your own kids, follow me, imitate me as I follow Christ. Amen? Maybe. This is our biblical calling, my friends, to make much of Jesus so that the next generation will know him and love him and follow him all the days of their life.